Welcome back, friends. Settle in, breathe deep, and let the past breathe with you. This is the second installment in our Halloween history series. True tales where myth brushes against the living world and footsteps echo long after the storytellers are gone. Here is a trigger warning for those of you who may be squeamish. These are real historical horror stories, so be warned and click away now if you feel you might be adversely affected. Tonight we wander through curses and cold trails, through dances that never end and prayers that never quiet. If you enjoy this style of ASMR history, then don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications to be alerted when another video in the series is posted. And if you'd like to support the journey, check out our Etsy store, link in the description. Now, let the lantern glow, and let the stories begin. Let's quiet our restless minds with the sound of a warm fireplace inside and a thunderstorm outside. Snuggle in for 5 great historical scary stories. Story 1. The Cursed Tomb of Tutankhamun, Egypt, 1922. In the winter of 1922, the Valley of the Kings lay silent, its golden sands concealing a secret that had slumbered for over 3,000 years. Beneath the sun-baked cliffs near Luxor, the tomb of a forgotten boy king waited, sealed in darkness. It was a moment that would unite modern ambition with ancient dread. For when British archaeologist Howard Carter struck his chisel into that final barrier, he opened not just a tomb, but a legend that would haunt the world. This is the story of Tutankhamun's curse, a tale where archaeology meets the supernatural, where light and science dare to trespass in the kingdom of the dead. For years, Howard Carter had searched in vain. Every expedition, every dig led to disappointment. The sands seemed to swallow his hope whole. His patron, Lord Carnarvon, a wealthy English nobleman, had nearly lost faith after funding season upon season of failure. The Valley of the Kings had been thoroughly explored, or so everyone thought. But Carter was relentless. He believed that one tomb, the tomb of Tutankhamun, a young pharaoh from the 18th dynasty, had escaped discovery. His name had surfaced in ancient records, a minor monarch who ruled after the heretic king Akhenaten. Yet no one had ever found his resting place. Then, in November 1922, a workman uncovered a step carved into bedrock. Then another, and another. They led to a sealed doorway bearing the cartouche of Tutankhamun himself. Carter wired Carnarvon at once. At last have made wonderful discovery in Valley, a magnificent tomb with seals intact. On November 26th, Carter held a candle to a small hole in the door and peered into the darkness. When Lord Carnarvon asked, "Can you see anything?" Carter replied, "Yes, wonderful things." He saw gold everywhere, shining through the dust of ages. The world erupted in excitement. Newspapers across Europe and America called it the greatest discovery of the century. But in Egypt, among local laborers and priests, there was unease. For the tombs of the pharaohs were not mere graves. They were sanctuaries sealed by divine magic, protected by gods and curses meant to ward off intruders. Carved upon other royal tombs were warnings like, "Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king." Carter, a practical man, dismissed such notions as superstition. But on the night of February 16th, 1923, when the burial chamber itself was opened, an eerie coincidence marked the beginning of what the press would soon call the curse of the pharaohs. As Carter broke the final seal, Thousands of miles away in England, Lord Carnarvon's dog howled and fell dead. Within weeks, Carnarvon himself was dead too, from a simple mosquito bite that became infected, leading to blood poisoning. Newspapers screamed of retribution from beyond the grave. The New York Times ran headlines like, "Pharaoh's Curse Kills Explorer." The London Times called it the Wrath of Tutankhamun. Even the famous writer Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, creator of Sherlock Holmes, weighed in, suggesting that elemental forces had guarded the tomb, awakened by the desecration. After Carnarvon's death, strange events multiplied. A cobra, symbol of divine kingship, appeared in Carter's house and killed his pet canary. The same night the tomb was unsealed. A radiologist, Sir Archibald Douglas Reed, who first X-rayed Tutankhamun's mummy, died suddenly of a mysterious illness. George J. Gould, a wealthy visitor to the tomb, fell ill after leaving Egypt and died in the French Riviera days later. A young Egyptian prince who had been among the first to enter the burial chamber was shot dead by his lover soon after. By the time the excavation was complete, newspapers claimed that 20 or more people connected to the tomb had died prematurely. The curse became a global obsession, a bridge between science and superstition, modernity and the ancient world's sense of sacred order. In later years, reports claimed that when Carnarvon's body was examined, the doctor found a small wound on his face, in the exact same place as a cut on the mummy of Tutankhamun. Was it coincidence? A trick of narrative? Or did the ancient king somehow mark his violator? Inside the tomb itself, Carter and his team found inscriptions invoking protection, spells from the Book of the Dead, prayers to Anubis, guardian of tombs, and images of serpents, jackals, and falcons designed to frighten evil spirits, or curious men. The Egyptians had long believed that the afterlife was fragile. To disturb a mummy was to shatter the soul's journey. The Ka, the life force, required offerings. The Ba, the personality, needed peace. And the Ren, the name, had to remain unspoken yet preserved. If any of these were defiled, the spirit could rise in fury. Thus, the tomb was not merely a burial site. It was a spiritual machine, built to preserve eternity itself. To violate it was to disrupt the machinery of immortality. Modern scholars have offered rational explanations. Some tombs contained ancient bacteria and fungal spores, sealed for centuries in the airless dark. When disturbed, these microbes could infect explorers, leading to sudden illness or death. Others point to coincidence. The curse deaths spread over many years, and many who entered the tomb lived long lives. Howard Carter himself lived until 1939, dying peacefully at 64. Yet even these logical defenses cannot erase the atmosphere of dread that hung over the excavation. Carter himself admitted that at times he felt watched, describing the tomb's air as oppressive, almost sentient. Archaeologist Arthur Weigel, present at the opening, wrote of a sense of unholy intrusion, as if the very stones resented their disturbance. Rational or not, the world wanted to believe the curse was real, and perhaps, on some level, it was. The 1920s were an age of fascination with the occult. Spiritualism was on the rise. Seances were fashionable among the elite. The world was still reeling from the mass death of World War I. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, and the deaths that followed, struck a nerve. Here was tangible proof, it seemed, that the ancient gods had power yet. But beyond fear of magic lay a deeper unease, a recognition that Western science had trespassed into the sacred. The imperial archaeologists of the early 20th century often saw themselves as conquerors of time, prying open the secrets of lost worlds. But the Egyptian tombs were not ruins to be studied. They were sanctified bodies. curse, then, may not have been mystical. It was moral. The dead, it seemed, demanded respect. Ironically, the king at the center of it all, Tutankhamun, was almost insignificant in life. He reigned barely 10 years, dying around age 19. His father, Akhenaten, had upended Egypt's religion, proclaiming the sun disk Aten as the sole god. After his father's death, Tutankhamun restored the old order, the gods of many faces, temples, and rituals. Perhaps, some whispered, this act of restoring balance made his spirit powerful. Others claimed that, as a child king buried hastily after an unexpected death, his soul never found peace. His tomb, the smallest in the Valley of the Kings, was sealed and forgotten, spared from grave robbers who stripped every other royal burial bare. That anonymity preserved him, and made him a ghost who would one day awaken to a new kind of fame. Even decades later, strange coincidences surround the boy king. When his treasures toured museums around the world, security guards reported odd occurrences. Power failures, alarms triggered by unseen movement, sudden drops in temperature near the mummy's case. In the 1970s, when the treasures reached Britain, one guard swore that the golden mask's eyes seemed to shift, watching him through the glass. In Cairo, visitors fainted before the mummy. A museum guide who mocked the legend was found dead of a heart attack hours later. Coincidence again, or echoes of a curse that transcends time? The human mind is quick to find patterns in chaos, to hear whispers in silence. Yet it is telling that Tutankhamun's name, once erased from history, now endures everywhere. In a way, the boy who wanted eternal life received it, though not as he expected. What if the curse is not vengeance but fulfillment? What if it worked? The ancient Egyptians believed that to speak a person's name was to give them life again. Tutankhamun's tomb, untouched for millennia, erupted into global consciousness the moment it was opened. His name, forgotten for 30 centuries, is now immortal, spoken by millions, engraved in museums, whispered in awe. The curse, perhaps, was not to destroy the living, but to ensure the dead are never silenced. And that, in a way, is the most haunting legacy of all. That we, in our fascination, have become the keepers of the pharaoh's eternity. The story of Tutankhamun's tomb sits at the crossroads of archaeology, psychology, and myth. It reveals the eternal tension between knowledge and reverence, between the living who dig and the dead who wait. Whether the curse is real or imagined, physical or moral, it endures because it touches something primal. The fear that some doors are meant to remain closed. Howard Carter may have dismissed superstition, but his discovery awakened something larger than science. A reminder that humanity's hunger to uncover the past always comes with a price. And in the hush of the Valley of the Kings, as the desert wind whispers through the stone corridors of the dead, it is easy to believe that the ancient words were true. Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king. Story 2. The Madness of King Charles VI, the Glass King of France. France, at the dawn of the 15th century, was a kingdom of silk and smoke. The perfumes of its courts mingled with the stench of blood from endless wars. Its monarch, King Charles VI, had once been called Le Bien-Aimé, the well-loved. He was young, handsome, and full of promise. But over the years, a terrible darkness crept into his mind, and the man who was once the hope of France became a figure of terror, a king haunted not by his enemies, but by himself. His reign began in brilliance. Crowned at 11, Charles inherited a realm still trembling from the 100 Years' War. He restored stability and ruled with grace and mercy. Yet beneath the splendour of the Valois court, something began to stir, a sickness of the soul that no crown could protect him from. The first signs appeared suddenly. In the summer of 1392, Charles led an army to punish a rebellious noble. The heat was unbearable, and the king, clad in armour, grew agitated. As they rode through the forest, a page accidentally dropped a lance, the clatter of metal breaking the tense silence. In that instant, something snapped inside the king. His eyes turned wild. With a cry of fury, he drew his sword and fell upon his own men, cutting them down in a frenzy until he was restrained, trembling, his face pale as marble. When he awoke, he could not remember what he had done. From that moment, the well-loved became the mad. His madness came in waves. Sometimes he did not know who he was. He fled in terror from his wife, Queen Isabeau, screaming that she was an impostor sent to kill him. He claimed not to have a wife or children at all. There were days he refused to bathe or change his clothes, reeking of filth, convinced that water itself was poison. And then there were the delusions. Strange, fragile beliefs that revealed the depth of his torment. He believed he was made of glass. He forbade anyone to touch him, fearing he would shatter into 1,000 pieces. He wore reinforced clothing lined with iron rods to protect his limbs. Courtiers moved carefully around him, bowing not out of reverence but fear of breaking their monarch. Medieval physicians could not explain it. Some whispered that the king was cursed, that witchcraft had entered the royal bloodline. Others saw divine punishment, the hand of God striking the proud kingdom that had turned from virtue. Yet to the people, it was more than a tragedy. It was horror. The king was the heart of the nation, and when that heart went mad, France itself trembled. While Charles languished in his delusions, the country fell into chaos. His relatives and nobles formed factions, scheming for power while the monarch sat muttering in his chambers. His illness became a mirror of France's own disintegration, a kingdom at war with itself. Some believed his madness was hereditary, a rot that ran through royal veins. Others saw in it the presence of demons. For in medieval belief, the boundary between mental illness and possession was nearly invisible. Accounts from his physicians and chroniclers speak of sudden fits, the king shrieking, seeing spectres in his room, calling out to invisible presences. The priests who tended him spoke of exorcisms, holy water, and relics pressed to his forehead, but nothing brought peace. The madness of Charles VI became legend, a tale of a man turned glass by the weight of divine judgment. He would recover at times, his mind clear, his voice calm. In those moments, he wept, fully aware of what he had done and the suffering his people endured. That was perhaps the cruelest part of his illness, that he could glimpse reason before it vanished again, as though the gods themselves teased him with sanity. He died in 1422 after decades of torment, leaving a kingdom divided, his line forever marked by instability. His grandson would be Henry VI of England, who inherited his madness, proving that the curse of the Glass King endured not only in story, but in blood. Historians now speak of schizophrenia, psychosis, or bipolar disorder, but diagnosis does not exorcise the fear. In Charles's story, we see the same dread that haunted the ancient world, the terror of the mind turned traitor. His madness was not a monster to be slain, but a ghost that lived within him, whispering that even kings, chosen by God, were not beyond human frailty. The people remembered him not only as the mad king, but as the mirror of their age, fragile, cracked, and haunted by invisible demons. Story 3. The Dancing Plague of 1518, the dance of death. In the summer of 1518, in the bustling city of Strasbourg, something impossible began. A woman named Frau Trophea stepped into the cobblestone street and started to dance. She danced without music, without joy, without end. Her feet moved as though possessed. When neighbours tried to restrain her, she only spun harder, sweat pouring down her face, her eyes glassy and vacant. At first, people laughed. A woman dancing in the street seemed odd but harmless. Yet as the day passed, she did not stop. Nor did she stop the next day, or the one after. By the end of the week, 30 more had joined her. Men, women, and even children, moving frantically through the square, unable to rest or sleep. Their bodies shook with exhaustion, their faces twisted in agony. The records call it the dancing plague, or choreomania. City officials were baffled. Physicians examined the victims and declared the cause to be hot blood, a fever of the spirit. Their remedy was not to stop the dancing, but to let it run its course. They cleared the grain market, erected a stage, and hired musicians to accompany the afflicted. Drummers and pipers played as the dancers convulsed and collapsed, their feet bleeding, their bones cracking beneath the rhythm. Within a month, hundreds were dancing. Some danced until they fainted. Others danced until their hearts burst. The city descended into madness. Clergy called it a punishment from God. Divine wrath visited upon a sinful city. They organized processions, carrying relics and chanting prayers to Saint Vitus, the patron saint of dancers and epileptics. The afflicted were herded to the shrine at Saverne to beg forgiveness, their bodies twitching as though strings pulled by invisible hands. No one could explain what had begun it, or why it spread like contagion. Modern scholars have offered theories: mass hysteria, ergot poisoning from mouldy bread, or collective stress after famine and plague. But the documents from that summer are filled with words that defy science. Witnesses spoke of faces twisting in terror, of dancers screaming that unseen figures held them captive. One monk wrote that they danced with their eyes rolled back, as if angels of death played the flute. In a city already haunted by hunger and disease, the spectacle of hundreds dancing themselves to death was both horror and omen. It seemed that Strasbourg itself had gone mad, the rhythm of life transformed into the rhythm of death. When the epidemic finally ended, after nearly 2 months, the survivors were broken. Some could no longer walk. Others claimed they could still hear the music in their heads. The priests who tended them spoke of strange silences afterward, of how the city seemed afraid even of laughter, as though any joy might awaken the plague again. The dancing plague remains one of the most unsettling mysteries in recorded history, a reminder that the mind, under pressure, can turn the body into its victim. Whether a curse, an illness, or a collective madness, it blurs the line between faith and fear. Perhaps the most chilling thought is not that they were poisoned or bewitched, but that they were, for a time, free of all control, trapped in a dance from which only death could release them. Story 4. The Exorcism of Anneliese Michel, the Devil in Modern Times. In the 1970s Germany, a young woman named Anneliese Michel began to hear voices. They whispered in the dark, mocking her prayers, twisting familiar hymns into blasphemy. She was 20 years old, a devout Catholic from a small Bavarian village. Her friends described her as kind, shy, and deeply religious. But something unseen had entered her life, and soon it would consume her entirely. It began with seizures. Doctors diagnosed epilepsy and prescribed medication. But the voices grew louder. She began to see faces in walls, to smell burning flesh, to hear footsteps that no one else could hear. She said that invisible hands struck her, that she was forbidden from entering churches, that crosses burned her skin. Her family sought medical help, but after years of treatment, Anneliese claimed medicine could not help her because her illness was not of the body. It was of the soul. Her parents turned to the church, pleading for an exorcism. At first, they were refused. The age of superstition, the priest said, was over. But the symptoms grew undeniable. She began to speak in voices, guttural, masculine, ancient. During one session, she shouted in Latin, naming herself as Judas, Nero, Cain, Hitler, and Lucifer. Her body convulsed with inhuman strength. She refused food, saying the demons forbade her to eat. She spoke of being in hell, of seeing damned souls. The church authorized a full exorcism, the rite of the Roman ritual, an ancient ceremony few had performed in modern times. 2 priests, Father Ernst Alt and Father Arnold Rentz, conducted 67 sessions over 10 months. Each session lasted hours. The recordings still exist. On them, her voice alternates between sobbing and growling, pleading and laughing, a chorus of madness and faith intertwined. The priests prayed, commanded, and invoked the saints, but the voices only taunted them. By June 1976, Anneliese was emaciated. She weighed barely 68 pounds. She told the priests that she would die to free others from possession. Her final words before she collapsed were simple. "Mother, I'm afraid." She died of starvation days later. Her death shook Germany. The priests and her parents were tried and convicted of negligent homicide. The church, uneasy and cautious, distanced itself, labeling her case a tragic misunderstanding. Yet those who heard the tapes could not forget them. Experts called it psychosis and epilepsy worsened by religious obsession. The faithful called it martyrdom. Skeptics called it a moral failure of a bygone age. But beneath all explanations lies an unshakable discomfort that the modern world, with all its science, still found itself performing medieval rites against invisible forces. Anneliese Michel became a symbol of the battle between faith and reason, belief and horror. Her grave became a pilgrimage site. Some who visit swear that the air around it feels charged, heavy. Others say that when the wind moves through the trees there, it sounds like a whisper. Her story endures because it forces us to confront the oldest question of all. If the devil no longer exists, then why do his shadows still move among us? Story 5. The Dyatlov Pass Incident, the Mountain of the Dead. In February of 1959, 9 young hikers set out into the frozen wilderness of the Ural Mountains. They were students, strong, experienced, disciplined, led by Igor Dyatlov, a man known for his calm leadership and sharp mind. Their goal was to reach Otorten, a mountain sacred to the local Mansi people, whose name meant, "Don't go there." When they did not return, search parties were sent into the snow. What they found defied understanding. The group's tent was discovered half buried in snow, sliced open from the inside. Their belongings, coats, boots, food, were neatly arranged, as though abandoned in haste. Footprints led away from the camp, barefoot or in socks, disappearing into the storm. The bodies were found in stages, scattered across a mile. Some lay frozen in poses of terror. 2 were found near a fire, their hands burned, their bodies stripped of clothing, as though others had taken them to survive. 3 more lay between the fire and the tent, faces turned toward home. Months later, the remaining 4 were found in a ravine. Their injuries were horrific: crushed skulls, broken ribs, internal damage with no external wounds, as if struck by massive pressure. one woman's tongue was missing. The official Soviet report concluded that they had died from a compelling natural force. No one knew what that meant. Over the decades, theories multiplied. Some claimed an avalanche, though the slope was too shallow. Others whispered of secret military tests, radiation weapons, or chemical exposure, for traces of radiation were found on their clothing. Locals told darker tales. The Mansi believed the mountain was cursed, haunted by the Menk, the spirit of the peaks. Hunters said strange orange lights had been seen in the sky that night, hovering above the snow. Investigators noted that the hiker's camera had captured blurred images, streaks of light, shapes in the dark. A diary entry by one of the group, written days before they vanished, mentions a peculiar phrase: "From now on, we know that the snowmen exist." Some said it was a joke about local legend. Others were not so sure. In the years that followed, the Soviet government sealed the files. Witnesses were told not to speak. When the documents were finally reopened decades later, they revealed confusion and fear even among officials. The word mystery appears again and again in their reports. Modern analysts have suggested katabatic winds, hypothermia, and disorientation. Others claim experimental weapons or the psychological effects of panic in sub-zero dark. But none of these explanations erase the image of 9 young people fleeing barefoot into a blizzard, slashing their way out of their own shelter as though something inside terrified them more than the storm outside. The Dyatlov Pass Incident remains one of the coldest mysteries of the modern age, a story not of ghosts or gods, but of the human mind confronting the incomprehensible. The mountain remains silent, indifferent, but each year, climbers leave small tributes there, candles, names, and the same unspoken question: what really happened that night? The snow has buried the evidence, but not the fear. Somewhere beneath that frozen earth lie the remains of the unknown, and perhaps the whisper of the mountain itself. In the language of the Mansi, the pass now bears a new name: the Mountain of the Dead. And though the official record speaks of weather and misfortune, those who know the legend still say that something inhuman walked that night on the slopes of the Urals, something that the storm was sent to hide. Thank you for keeping vigil with us. The night is quieter now, but history still murmurs, through closed doors, over mountain snow, behind museum glass. If you enjoy this style of ASMR history, then don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications to be alerted when another video in the series is posted. This is the second installment in our Halloween history series. More are coming soon. Until then, warm your hands at the fire of the past, and if you'd like to help keep these candles lit, check out our Etsy store, link in the description. Sleep well, and let the old world watch over you. Much love from yours truly, Lilly and Viking Adventures.